The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Hello, and help me welcome Chris Ager. Chris, you're the state representative for the National GOP.
That's right.
Tell our audience what that means. What do you do?
Yeah, well, Carl, thanks for inviting me here. I appreciate it. So I'm the Republican National Committee committee man for the state of New Hampshire, and there's only one, and that's me. I was elected last year by the NH GOP committee, which consists of almost 500 people. And there's a committee woman as well, and then the state party chairman is the third, and the three of us represent New Hampshire to the Republican National Committee.
I see.
So we essentially work under the committee that Ronna McDaniel, the chair for the RNC. Yeah, we work under her, and there are only 168 people on that committee for the entire country. And it includes the 50 states plus 5 territories. So that's what I do. And in the bylaws of the state GOP, my job is to represent New Hampshire to the Republican National Committee and to help support the maintenance of the first in the nation primary in New Hampshire. So we have that added job in our bylaws that most of the other states don't have anything like.
Well, that's nice. And you have, there's a woman, and what's her name?
Yep. So Juliana Bergeron, she lives over in the Keene area.
Right.
She's the committee woman. And Steve Stepanek, the state party chairman, who was just reelected last Saturday.
That was an interesting election,
It was.
That's where Zoom didn't work either.
Yes.
That initial election.
Yeah.
Well, tell us when you started with the election last year, and you went through a whole bunch of stuff until you're here now. So what were the elements of your job then?
Yeah, so for the election, in my national committee man job, we interface to, there's a regional political director, and that person worked with the state parties and campaigns, to help facilitate, the resources from the RNC coming into the state. And so being part of that team was interesting. It was really a Trump victory-led effort. So the RNC teamed up with the Trump victory campaign, and it really was driven by the Trump campaign, all the way from the White House all the way down to the local towns. And
I think they were very cooperative with the local people too.
It was. Well. There's the one thing that we're going to take a look at, possibly doing better, is when the president endorsed a congressional and a Senate candidate, it created some tension, as you would imagine. The folks who did not get endorsed versus the ones who did, they were treated differently. And we have to take a relook at that. And in the future, whether or not candidates at that level endorse people, it's up to them.
Yeah.
But the Republican National Committee and the state party remained totally neutral in all primaries.
Right.
But the appearance caused a little bit of friction between the candidates and their supporters. So that's something we got to take a look at, Carl.
Well, if nothing else, I think it affected the financing of the groups.
Well, the president's endorsement helped in a primary. There's no question about it. How that impacted us in the general election, I'm not sure.
No, yeah.
And we're trying to bring everybody back together. There's, as you can imagine.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing to avoid that if you can. It does have an undercurrent.
It does, and even though the Republican National Committee and myself and the New Hampshire GOP and the chairman and the staff, even though we're neutral, when people from the outside look at it and the candidates and their campaigns look at it, it doesn't feel neutral, because you have the Trump victory campaign, and so. It's totally understandable that people feel some people weren't neutral, even though they were, because of that setup. So we definitely want to take a hard look at that in the future as to whether or not that's something we want to get behind or try to help stop.
And so you've gone from the election through a national meeting to...
Yep. Yeah, so the election, we were very disappointed, not completely surprised at the top level. Very happy with what happened in the state from the governor on down. The president and the Senate and House, we're disappointed. But I do have confidence in the voting system in New Hampshire. I do think we need to look at the irregularities, very transparently so that everybody can understand and we can answer all the questions. And if we do find something, fix it.
Right.
But I do think we have a very good process. And the reason I do is I went to Wisconsin for the recount in Milwaukee County. And we had to stand 8 feet away from the ballots. We were not allowed to talk to the ballot counters. We couldn't even ask them questions. And so the first day we were there, the visibility was so poor, we went on to Amazon Prime and we bought binoculars. And just think how ridiculous that is. You're staying with binoculars trying to look at ballots as they're counting them. And in New Hampshire, you go to the Secretary of State on the recounts there, and they cooperate with the campaigns. And if anybody has a question, you're sitting right with the people, both sides, extremely transparent. And I do have a lot of confidence in our system.
Yeah, I've done a recount too. It's very interesting how you can say, oh, what's that? Why are you rejecting it, or shouldn't you reject that?
Yeah. Wisconsin, I mean, besides the beer and brats, it was it was tough because you had to check in every day. You had to stand back. Again, 6 feet sitting in a chair behind a yellow line on the ground. If your foot went over the line, a monitor would come and talk to you about moving your foot back. If you stood up, you had to stand behind your chair, which is another 2 feet back. So to see the ballots, you had to be 8 feet from them. So that didn't bode well from the beginning. And then, the challenge that the campaign had in Wisconsin, it lost up at the Supreme Court by a 4-3 vote. So it was a very close vote on the challenge. And, we did the best we could just to make sure it was fair. All of the legal ballots were counted. And, that was done with a group called the Mighty American Strike Force, which is affiliated and cooperates with the RNC. And so that's why I went. After that, we thought, okay, we're good for a while. And it was like, well, Georgia, we have a Senate runoff. Can you come down there and help? And so we had another team from New Hampshire go, many of the same people that went to Wisconsin, and went down to Georgia and helped go door to door and support those two candidates. And, that didn't turn out the way we had hoped. But when I talk to my Republican friends, we lost the Senate because of the tiebreaker, and the House stayed with the Democrats. But it was so close. It's 221 to 213. That's razor thin.
That is.
The Senate is exactly 50-50. The country did not reject Republican ideas. It absolutely did not. And the president's race, just looking at the reported numbers that were certified, it was extremely close in about 4 states that could have gone either way. So the country is evenly divided. This is no time to say, well, we lost, let me pack up my bag and go home. This is a time to say, we actually have a better message, but we have an institution of the mainstream media that doesn't allow us to get our voice out as much. So in an equal playing field, I believe we win. And so we are fighting. There are legal cases that are fighting against some of President Biden's executive orders on the pipeline that he stopped and threw away a lot of good jobs, a lot of good union, blue collar jobs. There are lawsuits against what he's doing at the border. And, the Republican Party is fighting the things that we think are bad for America. And I think going forward, this will be, Trump's America First agenda, that is going to be the party's position, and we're going to fight for that. So, you know, and
Well, there are a lot of good things that happened during his administration. And on the as far as the election's concerned, I'm still, you know, I go way back to the 60s. Okay, that's when I started getting active.
was that the 1860s?
Thank you. No, but that was the time of after Kennedy's assassination. Even though his election was disputed quite a bit, especially Texas and Chicago. And one of the things is almost every election since then, not as much as this one or as much as one way back in when Johnson was elected. This counting of votes has to be systematized in a regular way that we understand and we have confidence in. I don't think the last couple of elections in the last 20 years, every time they question something, whether your registration lists were old, not cleaned. You know, they had to sue Ohio this last year to make it clean, and all of a sudden it was a Republican. And the thing what they did in Pennsylvania, which was illegal, with people making changes that didn't have authority to make change, the legislation was. Those things are so blatant, I don't see how people can argue with them.
Yeah, so the RNC has recognized that there's a problem with confidence in the voting system and voting irregularities, and you know, some people call it voting integrity. And all we want to do is make sure that it's fair, and that if you have a legal ballot, there's a mechanism for you to cast it, and that they're properly counted. That's all that we want. And so there is a Republican National Committee standing committee that's being formed now that I volunteered to be on voter integrity and voting integrity. It's going to have a team of lawyers, election law lawyers, and the goal there is to identify where problems are with, you know, having fair and elections. Not that somebody's being necessarily nefarious, but you know, where there are problems, have those lawyers have legislative remedies where, hey, if you write a law like this, it should pass muster, and work with the states so that the state legislatures can enact proper laws or change them if necessary, and also work with secretaries of states and the other legislative bodies, even governors, to help. And so I believe in New Hampshire there's going to be a corresponding committee that will then interface.
Good.
And you know, our state is relatively good compared to some of the other states I've seen. It really is good, but we can always get better. And I know at the State House, there were 15 different LSRs earlier. I'm not sure how many are continuing now, but the election law committees are looking at all kinds of ways to make it better.
Well, I think they've been alert to it. I first ran in 2006, and almost every time there were some very, very close votes on legislators or maybe local offices, and you have to go through counting again. And sometimes it gets down where it's even, and you have to flip a coin or something. But we do have a regulation, and we do have other things that changed in that period of time, like what happens if there's a big snowstorm? You know, what can you do? And that wasn't very clear at the time, but now I think it's a little clearer who has the appropriate responsibility for saying we're closing the elections and we're going to go start it up the next day or the next week or whatever. And I know even now, what's left over the last election, I think it's in Wyndham or something, that's a question. And the hand votes didn't equal what the machine vote said.
Right,
something
right.
like that.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of discussion about Dominion, Smartmatic software on the voting. And we use older machines that have a heritage. They go back to, I think, AccuVote, and they're optical scanners. We did talk to the Secretary of State for quite a while about, the confidence in the machines. Every machine has to be programmed for every election, basically for every town, because you have, the ballot looks different. So you're counting different things every time. And so, but they're not connected to the internet. And when they're programmed in, before the election, they run sample ballots through to make sure that the count is right. So we also maintain, I believe it's for 22 months, the paper ballots. And so, we do have forensics that we can hold on to. We had, I believe, 16 recounts in the state. 16 for 16 maintained the winner. So nothing changed on those recounts. And they were done by hand, and I participated in 4 of them. In Windham, there's a problem because the 4 Republican state reps, they were all undercounted by 300 votes. And the Democrat who challenged was overcounted by 99. So it's approximately 400 vote difference, which is amazing. And so the Attorney General is looking at that. I know they're taking it seriously. The selectmen in Windham are involved, and that's being looked at. I don't know at this point whether it was a manual error in not counting a stack, or if it was a machine error or addition error. I just don't know, and we don't know. But we should demand, as the Democrat who lost that race, who asked for the recount, all of us should want to know what happened and fix it so that we don't have a problem in the future. There was also a reporting error the night of the election in another town in Merrimack, because they call in the numbers, but then they have to send in the official version. And there was a mistake there that was immediately corrected. These things happen, and they happen by mistake. They happen, who knows why they happen. But we really do have to stay on it to make sure that any little mistake is corrected so that we can have confidence.
That's
And
right.
right now, Windham is making a lot of people scratch their heads. So we must ensure that we find out as best we can what happened and fix it.
So there's some things being done on that now still? It's
Yes, the
open
Attorney
case?
General's office is looking into it. I know the individual who's actually in charge of that, and they are communicating regularly with the selectmen in Windham.
Well, I know one other thing that people always used to say, you get people coming up from Massachusetts who are voting for us. But I think that they've, after they prosecuted a couple of them, it's probably not happening anymore. Or...
Well, I don't know of any cases from this past election.
Yeah.
Previous years, there's some very disturbing things that have happened. You go to the address where 6 people are registered and did vote, and it's an empty lot. And you go, that's kind of unusual.
Yeah.
That happened in Georgia also while we were down there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we were going door to door, and we're going to empty lots. And it's like, this isn't good. One home, 25 different people voting, a single family home. Boy, that's not, doesn't sound very legitimate.
Yeah.
And, there have been people who've been caught, voting in 2 places. That's against the
They
law.
had somebody that was investigating finally. I know it took several years before we even got that place.
Yeah, and so there are things that happen, and campaign workers who come in to help one candidate, and then they claim they live in New Hampshire, they vote, and the day after the election they leave. Those are the kind of things that
we had
we...
one here in Nashua that had some workers and the candidates staying over to help the candidate, and they were from out of state and they voted too.
Yeah, those are the kind of things that we're hoping the election law committee will tighten up for us.
Well, I like the way too, though, your absentee ballots are handled. People have to go in and request it, and it gets mailed to them. There's no this idea of just mailing to everybody because you want to have them vote. Well, if they're not interested enough in registering, I don't think they really have to be dragged to vote.
Yeah, I think it's a responsibility that people should take seriously.
And it's not hard to do.
No, it's especially in New Hampshire, very easy.
Right.
Very easy to do. And I know there's another discussion about same-day registration versus motor voter, and the legislature's looking at that again. And again, that's the legislative job. And there are a lot of good, knowledgeable people on those committees.
Good.
So hopefully they'll come up with something that passes muster that everybody can look at and say, hey, this isn't advantaging one side or the other. Right. It's just fair, and we just want it to be correct. So,
well, you got some things that you're doing to make sure that people are more aware of the election coming up, local elections, as well as the statewide and national election.
Yeah, so the next federal election is in 2022. There's a Senate and a House seat up. Well, both House seats are up every 2 years. We're looking at those two House seats and the Senate seat to pick up for Republicans. The Senate seat and at least one House seat should be very achievable. And especially looking at what the Biden administration has done so far, I cannot envision that people in the Granite State are going to look back and want to reinforce that. If anything, I think there'll be buyer's remorse based on what the terrible job they're doing already in just a few weeks on the economy. They're putting in structural problems that we didn't have, and opening up the border from Mexico to let people just come in the country, and then talking about stopping people from commuting or traveling to Florida. That's just ridiculous. I mean, those kind of things are stupid. It's just stupid. And so when you look at an administration doing things like that and stopping a pipeline, but the oil can still come out of Canada on rail cars and trucks, which is worse for the environment than a pipeline. Talking to Iran, rolling out the red carpet for Iran, backing off on China, it just, I cannot envision that the people of this country and this state are going to want to reinforce that.
Well, the job part, I think, is the most important part. We're getting over this virus, we're getting inoculated, and people want to get back to work, and they want to grow a little bit, I think. There's a lot of good things that can happen here to increase the operation of New Hampshire, to make more jobs, to encourage growth, which is what I think the country needs again. A good economy makes a lot of happy people.
Well, I have a lot of confidence in the governor and the legislature in New Hampshire.
I do too.
The budget that just came out, we were able to take a look at that. It looks reasonable, and so people in the middle could look at that and say that's reasonable. And so I think it's good for the state.
I think it's amazing how we put it together with so many problems that are in here because of the situation with the virus.
Yeah, there's a small spending reduction, and there's also a systematic reduction in the tax burden. And so, looking at the budget reduction, the tax reductions, efficiency in the school, the higher education system, Department of Energy, restructuring a few things to work better for the people of the state. I think they've done a good job. I have a lot of confidence in this, Senator Morse and the Speaker, Packard. I think we're going to have a really good year, and the way we get reelected in 2022 and help down ballot is just by doing our job.
Right.
And so far, I've been very happy with the State House.
I'm very happy about one thing, that they're really looking at the organization of the administration, and they're not growing it, which is really what makes your taxes go up.
Yep. And we still have money in the rainy day fund.
That's right.
Where we're not putting our hand out like other states. And so that's a well-run state. So one thing I just, in our last couple of minutes here, is the First in the Nation primary is very important to us.
Yes.
And that's part of my job. So I have been talking to other RNC members, and our side is keeping the Republicans together, but we have counterparts on the Democrat side. And, that's the one area we can work together pretty easily because we have the exact same goal. And so I look forward to working together with my counterparts on the other side to help maintain it. And we are talking to a lot of folks and explaining why it's good for the country. And, other states, big states, it costs a lot of money
That's right.
to compete for president. And so who has a bigger voice? People with money. Whereas in New Hampshire, you can really vet candidates. They have to talk to average people. They have to go to town halls. They go to somebody's, living room, and they have to do retail politics. And you can kind of filter differently than just money. And so we do have a lot to offer, and we do have a lot of diversity of opinion here.
That's right.
And very well-educated folks in politics. It's kind of like in our DNA. So we do have an advantage there.
Well, having that ratio, it's usually 30-30 and 40, 30-30 on the Republican Democrats and the 40 for the independents. That I think is the ideal way of having an exposure to for the candidates.
Yeah, and it's a small enough state that you can really get around and get a feel for the whole state. And so the Electoral College, very important for the state. And, we want to continue to support that. Otherwise, we'll be ignored.
Good. Well, Chris, I guess we ran out of time, but thank you very much. And we'll have you back later on this year because I want to hear what's been accomplished in the next couple of months.
All right. Thank you, Carl.
Thank you.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.